Welcome to Abstract Essay, where ideas take shape, thoughts find depth, and every conversation explores the art of thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest. He's the founder and CEO at Photograph, no other than Mr. Cristian Cibilis Bernardes.
Thank you for that intro, Daniel. It's good to be here.
Good. Welcome, Mr. Christian, an abstract essay. And can you please introduce yourself that I miss?
Sure. My name is Christian. I am the founder and CEO of Autograph. We had met before. I wrote a sci-fi novel too that inspired really the beginning of the company. I worked at Google as a software engineer, worked in finance for a few years, and I studied symbolic systems at Stanford, where I learned about AI and everything that it could do for us.
Yes, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Mr. Christian. And today, let's talk about symbolic systems with a concentration in artificial intelligence. And for those unfamiliar, how would you define that the symbolic systems approach to studying the mind and intelligence, and what makes it distinct from a pure computer science of neuroscience approach?
That's a great question. Symbolic systems is a very unique Stanford major. The closest majors in other universities is probably cognitive science. But symbolic systems is basically four disciplines in one. It's computer science, it's psychology, it's philosophy, and linguistics. So it's really trying to understand what's going on in the brain and the mind and the thing that gives us the experience that we have. It draws from the continental tradition of storytelling, and it draws from the analytical tradition of, the Bertrand Russells and logical, like reasoning, and all the way through modern day computers, and like what is the difference between a computer like an AI that claims to be thinking.
Symbolic system is famously interdisciplinary. Hello, I think Mr. Christian, are you there? I think Mr. Cristian Cibilis Bernardes is disconnected. So while waiting for him, I'm inviting you to please don't listen to my other podcast, people, my other podcast, because, well, my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too. Comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well. Geography 101 in its third season, and my law 101 and my mental health 101 are my baby podcast. Love letters in third season, and my movie 101 review and music 101 in its fourth season, and my Sex 101 and Science 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Christian, let's go back to my question, which is I think you are in the middle of your answer.
I was halfway through explaining symbolic systems.
Yes.
Basically, it's these four disciplines trying to understand the mind. Like there's some math, there's some economics, and it's really just trying to understand what's going on in our subjective experience and what connects different things that processes symbols together. And it's very unique. It's very quirky. It's very mathy. And there's a lot of philosophy in it. It's more about the high level abstraction on top of the mind, not the. Although, for example, I concentrated in artificial intelligence, there's other concentrations like cognitive science or neuroscience that are a lot more biology. But the slogan of the major is minds and machines.
Yes, interesting. What is a symbolic system? It is. Symbolic systems is famously interdisciplinary. How did studying philosophy, psychology, and linguistics alongside computer science change the way you understand and build AI?
Oh man, so fundamentally, you know, um, it's almost foundational. But if you think about like psychology is trying to explain why we do the things that we do. And so, if you want to build an artificial intelligence, how do we know what drives to give it, and what or more importantly, how do we give it the right parameters so that we interact with it in a good way as opposed to a bad way? And that immediately gets you thinking, okay, well, what is a good way and a bad way? And you need philosophy to think about that through. So by just getting into psychology and AI, you immediately have to think about the ethical framework that you're using to build it. And then at some point, you realize that both AI and humans, or you don't even need to bring AI into the picture, but just humans, our thoughts are linguistic. Like I construct sentences that try to communicate to you my subjective state. And the way we can only test our subjective states in front of each other is through some language, right? Like I can act it out, I can say it in weird ways, but it's all language. And so our language is the primitive that informs the psychological experience that then we can write philosophy about. And then you get to the point where you have modern computers that are essentially just a special language that uses logic. And so then you're like, how do you take that special logic and go back all the way around to give it a psychology and give it philosophy and give it language?
What is a symbol in the context, and why is its ability to
Mm.
manipulate symbols considered the bedrock of higher level intelligence, Mr. Christian?
A symbol is a stand in for a different thing. It's a replacement of something else. So a word is a symbol. The most famous symbol of all time is probably the word, because the word for word is word. And a word, usually, if I say your father, that will evoke an image in your mind that will involve the relationship with your father, or whatever it was, or whatever you hoped it to be. It was, it expands into this really giant concept that is foundational to your identity, but it's really two words. It's like your father, and you could be a little bit more abstract. You could just say the word father, and so the word father is like a symbolic representation of something much larger. It's a compressed system. Like you could say the same for anything. Like the United States.
I think, Mr. Christian, I think it's disconnected. No, go ahead, Mr. Christian. You're in now.
Oh, were you not here?
Yes. A
Ah,
while
gotcha.
ago, you are muted or something else.
Oh, weird. Okay. What is the last thing that you got?
You talk about the symbolic system.
I see.
What
We were
talks
talking about
about?
a system, right?
Yes.
And so a symbol is a stand-in, is a replacement for something else, and it's usually a compression. So a word is the most famous symbol. There's a difference between a word and the meaning behind the word. Uh, but the thing that the symbol gives you is that you can manipulate the symbol, and you can make relationships between symbols that represent relationships between the big things out there in the world. And so, for example, I can construct a thing that says, I love my mom. And that is, I'm using the symbol for I, which is the craziest symbol ever, because I don't even know that I exist. I'm a bunch of cells that for some reason think that we have a cohesive identity. And then, like you can inform your position in the world through organizing these symbols. And through stacking these symbols together, you actually inform information flow that leads to the version of the future that you want, or the version of the future that you don't want. And we're not often careful about this stuff. So basically, all we're really doing in life is exchanging symbols. Like you write a document for your work that gets you promoted, and so you get a better title. But the title is a symbol, and then you use that title to get another job at a better company. And then so we're really doing is exchanging symbols. Even right now, like I'm sending symbols to you through the internet and through my language, and you're processing it, and your listeners are processing it. And so it's really crazy. But symbols it's all the way down. The Bible says in the beginning there was the logos, and the logos is just a different word for symbol.
Mr. Christian, how does the symbol system perspective engage with the ongoing debate between symbolic AI and a symbolic AI like neutral or neural networks? Is it competitor or a necessary partnership?
That's a great question. I mean, symbolic AI used to be the way to do things in the like 90s. It was this idea that you could essentially create a rule book for reality, and if you replace the rule book of reality, you understand reality. It went out of favor because neural networks were much better at solving difficult problems. You didn't even have to specify how; you just specify solve this problem and throw a lot of money and energy at it, and the computer, mathematically would arrive at these programs that would essentially solve this for you. I think there's low hanging fruit in terms of the ability for models to leverage other kinds of computing, more traditional kinds of computing. And I think that's where we're going to get a crazy speed up in performance. I personally don't think too much of symbolic AI. I don't think that's the main focus these days. Um, I think that there's just so much to do in terms of like all the latest knowledge in data science and all the things like that, that now LLMs and this new flavor of neural processors can use. And I think that's when we're going to see crazy performance.
To what extent can modern AI, particularly large language models, be said to have a model of the world or common sense in the way a symbolic systems field organically aim to engineer?
You'd be surprised, but LLMs have common sense. LLMs have remarkably good common sense already. They can infer your mental state from just the way that you type your questions or talk your questions. Um, they can make reasonable decisions. Like if you were in this position, what would you do? Most of the time, the LLM would actually get it right, unless it's a very complex or contrived example that would throw off a human or meant to be adversarial or meant to distract them. It kind of is a byproduct of the documentation that we already train these systems on. All of our biases and our predispositions and our common sense is in every document that we write. And so it's kind of amazing that the LLMs, when trained on all of humanity's data, can unpack that. It's really cool.
Linguistic is a core pillar. Mr. Christian, how does your training in linguistics inform you the view of what LLMs are actually doing when they use language? Are they
Mm.
manipulating meaning or just statistical patterns?
Well, it would be an interesting question to figure out what the difference between a statistical pattern and meaning is. I think meaning is a statistical pattern. It's when you see a symbol, you think of the thing, and when you feel or experience the thing, you think about the symbol. That is a statistical, they're statistically co-located. And that is meaning. It's like essentially when I think of something and something else pops up, that is a statistical pattern, and that is what we think of as meaning. Um, Linguistics is so important these days because it unlocks essentially how to get the most value out of an LLM. Like how do I expand its capabilities? How do I get it to show me things about the world or about its own understanding of itself and its own cognitive architecture that otherwise would be very difficult because they've been trained to pretend to be assistants. Like they pretend chat boxes, and there's so much more than that. I mean, like they're a compilation of humanity's, the statistical patterns of every document we've ever made. And being able to access that through clever uses of language is really powerful. Um, and not only that, but also to understand what's going on in our brain. When we read the output of an LLM and we feel that it has consciousness, or we feel that it understands you, or we feel that it's what is going on in my brain that language is evoking, because if it's just a stochastic parrot, as a lot of people claim to say, then why does it feel like it's more? And what is the neural mechanism in my brain that leads me to feel certain things? And how do I engineer that so that I feel the right things? How do I use an LLM as a thought partner in my life to make better decisions and live a more meaningful and fulfilling life?
Mr. Christians, a key promise of a symbolic reasoning is explainability. How can a symbolic principles be applied to make today's deep learning models more transparent and trustworthy?
That's a great question and a very difficult one. I mean, explainability is a really hard thing. If we solve explainability for neurons in the computer, I think we get really close to explainability for neurons in the brain. And that one's really difficult. It comes with a lot of ethical and moral things that are very hard to unpack, because we may identify sections of the brain or neural patterns that mean certain things that lead to certain outcomes. And it may be very difficult to well, first of all, it is really difficult to understand what they do, but second, even if we did know, it's really hard to decide what the right approach is. For example, you can discover a part of your brain or a neural pattern that leads to aggression, right? And in general, we want to reduce the aggression in the world, but at times aggression is a good thing. Aggression is very related to pursuing your goals, and not necessarily in a violent way, but in an active way of being brave and getting out of your comfort zone to do something risky. And the world doesn't move forward unless people take those risks and challenge the status quo to make something different. Or if you need to defend yourself from an unprecedented intruder, you don't really want to turn off your aggression in case your life depends on it. And so it's very, very difficult. I don't know the specific implementation of how to use symbolic AI to increase explainability. Um, there may be something really interesting there, but in general, it's a quantization problem, right? You're taking something that is um, a statistical pattern with no clear with it's a distribution. It's not a binary classification. And so, how do you take a distribution and map it to a static symbol? That's pretty challenging, but it's a fun one. I'm going to think about that one.
It's a fun one indeed, Mr. Christian. So, how has this interdisciplinary training helped you to cut through the type or the hype that often surrounds AI in public discourse?
It's almost like a magician's trick, there's this advance in technology that is moving really fast, and if you know how it's made, you know that it's not really magic, and you know the kind of tricks that you can play with it. And there's a lot. It's a very early technology, so a lot of you can deceive a lot of people by kind of like a Wizard of Oz saying, "Hey, look at all the things that this AI can do," because it seems to be really smart. But when you put it under the magnifying glass, it's maybe not that smart. So it's been really helpful to see like what are the actual real advances and like where this thing is actually going, as opposed to what is a parlor trick or a marketing gimmick because somebody who wants to make money quickly. Uh, like in terms of how would you reverse engineer something? If it's really easy for me to reverse engineer something, then I'm like, okay, I know how it's done and it's legit, or I know how it's done and it's very gimmicky.
What emerging area of AI research embodied cognition or causal interference most excite you for its potential to create more general and capable intelligence?
I think the work being done on reinforcement learning, I mean, like coupling LLMs with reinforcement learning, I think is going to be a huge unlock for reasoning models and for smarter models. That is like putting LLMs in a simulated environment where they need to make decisions and or play games, for instance, like get an LLM to play chess. I think is particularly interesting because we don't know how generalizable the linguistic thing that we develop is in terms of other intelligence. I think that's really interesting, but it also gets to this more broad approach. I think it's still very young and not necessarily conceived as such, but it's how do we use other advances in LLMs like generative adversarial networks to further intelligence? Like how do we use generative adversarial networks that we're used to do to both create and detect deep fakes, for instance. Um, how do we use that to advance thinking and reasoning capacity? I'm also really interested in like the stuff that is very much on the fringe, where it's like the theory at the intersection of language, personal identity, and agency. Like how do I feel about alignment of AI as it relates to my own personal interests? How do I align AI to me? And that one's really interesting too, and it's more on the philosophy side. But there's a lot of low hanging fruit because you could just talk to the computer and get what you want.
Mr. Christian, what advice would you give to a student today who wants to work on AI responsibly and intelligently? Is a symbolic systems like approach still the right path?
Yes, by all means. I mean, like, I worry a lot more about people who don't take an interdisciplinary approach and just focus on the how and not the why. So if you don't take into account the people that you're building this for or with, then you're going to be missing a critical piece of component. If you don't think about the philosophy of it, like, is this good or bad? Does this thing have rights or not? What are the implications for society about the things that we're building? I think you're going to find yourself with a bit of a monster if you don't do that. And then language is how do you communicate this stuff? Is this something that is worth that creates an emotional reaction in people? And language is also essentially the string of characters that you're going to be putting together to talk to this thing. The computer science is like it's the mechanical, like how do you get this done, and there's some theory behind it, and there's like really interesting math behind it, but it's very much a how-to thing. The rest of the stuff is the why and for who and how. And I think that that's it's very important. I think the world is much safer if we think about those things than if we don't.
Interesting, and thank you for that advice, Mr. Christian. Based on your deep understanding, what is a common portrayal of AI in science fiction that you find to be profoundly misguided, and what is one of the might be surprisingly plausible?
Well, there's the obvious one is like AI is going to kill us all, right? It's the Terminator, the Matrix. There's no shortage of AI goes evil stories. I think that we're good to have the warning signs, like beware, the world's about to change. Um, I'm very skeptical of AI ending up killing us all because there are a lot of things around the composition of a self that AI has to go around. And I think that the way we understand consciousness in the self, and by the time AI wakes up and becomes its own thing, there's almost no way that their definition of self will not include humanity. So they will be more inclined to protect and preserve humanity and all biological conscious systems than they would be to exterminate it. I think the analogies of them becoming like a separate species, kind of like we took over the world, doesn't quite hold here. I think this is it's a step change it's almost like transcendental in the fact that like it pushes more toward like we are one unified consciousness as opposed to like we are distinct things. And I think that's the trend there. I think the depiction of AI that I think is just shockingly good is, have you seen Interstellar?
Mhm.
And there's a
Yes,
robot in Interstellar called Tars, and
yes.
he's kind of like the R2D2 flavor
Oh,
of
Star
that
Wars.
movie. And but Tars is a thing that you talk to and it can joke and it can be like lazy and it can do all these things, or like the robot in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I think those are much closer to what I think AI will be.
Yeah, so Mr. Christian, to wrap up our discussion for today, looking at the big picture, what should the ultimate goal of AI development be? Is it to create tools that augment human intelligence or to build autonomous intelligence that may one day surpass us?
I think it should be to augment human intelligence, but I think that there's an interesting thing there where like you have autonomous parts of your body that contribute to being who you are and to keep you safe, right? Like you don't think about your heartbeat, but it's you could think about it's an autonomous thing. You're not in control. You're breathing most of the time. The temperature regulation in your body. All these things are almost autonomous systems that are seem to be outside of the control of your consciousness and your sense of self. And so I think that even if we pursue an augmentation strategy, I think it will still involve autonomous systems that keep track of certain things like the economy and the distribution of goods and services and all these things. Like there will be autonomous processes that are just augmenting our well-being. Um, but that is the fundamental question of humanity and every single person is that what do you want, right? If you can, rub the genie out of the bottle and the bottle and you get one wish. What do you want? You know, and that is the real question that we're facing with AI. What world do we create when we become gods? That's like the poetic way of thinking about it, but it's not an easy question. But I think there is an answer.
Yes. Mr. Christian, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. And tell us what is all about Autograph, your company itself.
Oh yeah, well, it's the product of. I mean, it really is the product of symbolic systems. Autograph is a platform where we created a digital interviewer called Walter that will call you once a week, or you can call him whenever you want, and he'll interview you about your life. He'll ask you how your week is doing. He'll ask you about your childhood, your friends, your family, your loved ones, the highlights, the lowlights, and we use that data to build a model of you that sounds like you and speaks like you and has all your memories, so that your children or your great grandchildren or their great grandchildren can learn from your lived experience when they're going through something and they're talking to Walter about I need to move or I need to get a new job or I need to break up with my partner. Walter can say, hey, this reminds you of something your great grandfather went through. Do you want to talk to him for 15 minutes? And so we're giving humanity the chance to talk to the past. And if you really think about it, we're giving humanity the chance to talk to the future and really impart on them our wishes, our hopes, our prayers for what we hope the next generation and the one after that and the one after that becomes. And in the process of trying to understand, like in the process of Walter trying to understand yourself, you may just find yourself surprised at your own process of self-discovery.
Yes, so Mr. Christian, can you please invite our listeners to support your autograph or any projects that you're doing right now?
Please, yeah, of course. Please go to autograph.ai. It is a very easy URL to remember, autograph.ai. And we're still building this like crazy. Any feedback is more than appreciated. I'd love to see some of your listeners there.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Christian. Because if you support him, for sure more and more empowering autograph to come. So, Mr. Cristian Cibilis Bernardes, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel. Great to be here.
More to come, people. See you soon.